thinking of yourself in a system, I think enables you to think in that way and to kind of make the most of the other people and the other kind of things happening around you.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello, my name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter. Today Joe is interviewing Kieron Faller of Workio. Joe is introduced to Kieron by the lovely Paula Gardner, and he is another 2 for the price of 1 guest, also booked in for the Engage for Success podcast. Kieron started his career as a lawyer, went on to run a music industry technology company, and is now co-founder and CEO of Workio, whose mission is to make work better by unlocking the power of culture. Workio understands company culture through data to help companies, recruiters, investors, consultants and advisors in areas such as hiring, internal management, employee retention, M&A transactions and more. Kieron holds an executive MBA from the University of Cambridge and is a fellow of the RSA. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Kieron Faller of Workio, and I'm traumatised now because we've been talking about how you pronounce names and things, and I've got it right, so I'm impressed with myself. So, welcome Kieron, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So start by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do and where you do it.
Sure. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of a startup called Workio, and we help companies understand their company culture and use that understanding to hire the right people for their culture and manage their people in a way that will strengthen their culture over time. And we're based in London. We're in a co-working space near Liverpool Street Station. And yeah, before doing this, I ran a music industry technology company for a few years, and before that, I was a lawyer for a few years.
And we met through the lovely Paula Gardner, who does introduce me to some interesting people, and she has a background in the music industry too. Did you know that? Is that how you connected?
We met through a mutual friend who's in music. Yeah.
See, that's one of those, random connection things that I just thought I was throwing that in, and you were going to go, no, we met in some other way. So lovely, excellent. So you're in a co-working space. So that's I think I've had one other person on the show who was Rob in Canada, who was in a co-working space at the time. So what does that mean in terms of the environment for you on a sort of day-to-day basis? I think we all have sort of our perceptions of what these places are like. Have you got a helter-skelter?
No helter-skelter. Although we do have sparkling water on tap, which is so the space that we're in is a really interesting one. It's called Mindspace, and it's a bit more focused on a kind of holistic approach to work, which I think you'd be interested in. So they have things like yoga classes in early morning and like lunchtime mindfulness and meditation sessions. And it's I've been in quite a few WeWorks over the last few years, just having meetings with people, and I've always found them to be slightly frantic. I think they're very full usually, lots and lots of people in a small space, and just the vibe I think is a bit frantic. And so Mindspace is a bit more relaxed but focused, so it's a bit quieter. People tend to be a bit more focused on their work, which works well for us.
Yeah, I guess that's partly where their name has come from.
Indeed.
It's interesting. I read a lot of articles, and I think I've spoken to people who have talked about co-working spaces and sort of making a choice that actually it's a bit like so many other things in our life. It's very personal. It's about finding what suits you, as opposed to them all being the same, because they're not.
Yes, yeah, that's what we found. So we had a look at a few different ones before we chose to base ourselves here, and just there's a lot of different vibes in different places. So yeah, I'd say it's definitely kind of finding the right thing for you. But the main benefit that we get from being in a co-working space at all is my co-founder and I actually having a space where we will get time in the same physical space, because we could both be working from home, and we do on occasion, but also just that thing of having a bit of a separation between home life and work life. So it's like that kind of ritual of leaving home, getting the train, getting into the office, and then doing officey things here, and then getting back on the train, going home and doing home things at home. So
yes, yeah, and I can see how that, as you say, sort of divides that up. And do you think that the other people that are in the same co-working space, are they sort of in the same, or do they have the same sort of outlook? Going back to it being a sort of, you find the place to suit you. You talked about the mindfulness and the yoga. Is that sort of characteristic of all the organisations that are there? Do you think that the people are quite interested in the more sort of holistic side of things?
I think in general, yes. There's some exceptions, as anywhere, but yeah, I think in general, the people are of a similar mindset, which again also helps.
So tell us more about why you do what you do. So you've had quite a change in your career from what you've told us of your background already. So how is what you do now come about, and why is that important to you?
So yeah, there's a few things that kind of weave together here. So the first thing is that my wife changed jobs a few years ago now, quite a few years ago now, and she was changing by choice. She just wanted a different challenge, and went through recruiters, interviewed at various places, and chose to work at this particular interior design firm. And she had met the senior management through the interview process and all of that stuff, and she was really excited to go to work there. And then she quit within 3 weeks, because the culture was just anathema to her. It really didn't suit her at all, and she didn't suit it. And that was the first big thing that got me thinking quite a lot more about culture in the workplace, and thinking that whole process is really broken, because that company paid a decent chunk of money, and paid in other ways through time, energy, effort to bring her in, and she made a big commitment to go in there, and then it just really didn't work, and so the cost of that failure, both in kind of personal, emotional aspects, and in the kind of hard cash aspects from the business's perspective, just seemed really inefficient and wasteful.
Yeah.
So
was it really that I was in HR many years ago, and there was always that joke about what was it? It was about you go to the pearly gates and decide whether you want to go into heaven, or they give you a little trip into hell to see what that's like. And heaven looks okay, but hell looks amazing, and you choose hell, and then when you actually turn up, it's all like burnt and horrible and awful. And they say that was when we were recruiting you. This is the reality now. You're actually here.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, is that what happened?
Yeah, I think so, pretty much. But also there didn't seem to be very much self-awareness from the company's perspective about what they were really like. I think this particular company had very high staff turnover, as you might expect. But their senior management team had all been there for a long time. So they were kind of comfortable with how things were and happy enough. And I guess they just thought, oh, there's, those middle managers and junior people just are annoying or don't know what they want, or the problem is with them somehow. So that was the first big thing. And then when I was running the music industry technology company, we opened up a small office in Vietnam, and we were a very, very small, like less than 10 person company based in London, but serving quite a large client base across the independent music sector. And we were growing geographically, and so we were getting Korean clients, some Japanese clients, and also working with Asian music services, the kind of Asian equivalents of Spotify and YouTube and that kind of stuff. So we needed an office over there to support those clients and partners we were working with. And so that got me thinking about what kind of people do we need? Because the Vietnamese and kind of general Asian work culture is very hierarchical, very, wanting to be directed as a more junior employee. And we knew that as a company, our company running in London, we were very, very flat hierarchy, very kind of open to ideas from anywhere. We wanted people to make their own decisions, in the context and in the way that we would want them to make those decisions, but still we weren't going to, give them a list of things to do every day. So that made me think, okay, we're looking for we're looking for the weirdos in
Did you put that on your recruitment brochures?
Pretty much. We were looking for people out of the ordinary, I should say, in the Vietnamese work culture. And so through that process, we kind of really had a hard look at ourselves in London to understand what we were really like. And then we were very, very clear on the values and character traits that we were looking for in the people that we would hire in Vietnam. And that process worked really, really well. So we ended up with a team of 4 people in Vietnam that were absolutely fantastic and worked really well with us. So that kind of going through that process as the manager of a company also got me thinking, like, there are better ways to think about culture in recruitment in particular, but also in kind of ongoing company management. And then I, while doing an MBA at Cambridge a couple of years ago, while working at that music industry company, then I kind of started to work up this company culture model that we use at Workio to really understand culture from the employee's perspective and use that in various ways.
Yeah. So what was it? Were you always fairly sort of entrepreneurial throughout your career, even though you worked in different areas and obviously different countries and stuff?
I would say no. I don't think of myself as entrepreneurial. I don't really, like, if someone were to ask me whether I was an entrepreneur, I would probably say no. It's just there's this very specific thing that I think we've come up with an approach which no one else is using, which I think would benefit a lot of people if they were to use it. So it's more that I've been kind of dragged into starting this business by the idea and by the potential impact, rather than thinking, oh, I'd love to start a business, what can I do? Yeah.
Okay. So let's sort of push that forward a bit then into how you sort of work and the fact that I talk to people who have always wanted to do stuff on their own, and they've always wanted to grow a business from nothing and all that sort of stuff, and that they have a certain way of being and working. It's interesting that you've just sort of said, no, I was a bit reluctant, really. More about the purpose, less about the sort of I guess the lifestyle or whatever. But what impact does that have on how you go about doing this?
Yeah, I guess it's an interesting one. I think obviously people are different in all sorts of ways, and I think I'd say sometimes the feeling that, I mean, for me at least, where in previous roles I've kind of perhaps not always agreed with with how I'm being asked to do something, or with kind of strategic decisions that senior management are making, and you get that kind of natural reaction of like, oh, I wish I could just make all these decisions. I think that's natural, but I think that's also partly born out of these culture problems that we're trying to help people do better with. Is I think if employees were more closely involved in how the workplace works and in what the culture is, and more closely involved in the kind of cultural development of companies, then I think possibly some of that push that people feel to want to do things themselves or want to start their own thing might diminish. So I think it's partly, or my read of it at least, as someone with my experience and what I'm doing now, is that it's partly due to poor management of the culture in companies in general. Kind of probably more so that than just the kind of instinct that some people I'm sure do have of just wanting to be the person that starts a thing. So I wonder if we can improve the workplace culture experience for employees, then I wonder if that push might diminish.
Yes, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And I guess there's some organisations that are really valuing the idea of what they call an intrapreneur, so somebody being entrepreneurial within a structure. And there's many people who work for themselves who lament the whole sort of feast and famine sort of nature of sort of working for yourself, on a lot of the time. And maybe that, as you say, if culturally in organisations people were encouraged to be more entrepreneurial but could still have a job and get paid at the end of the month, exactly, find more customers, maybe that would be a win-win all round.
I think so. And I think a lot of companies, especially as you kind of go up the size scale, I think companies are desperate for employees who are willing and able to take initiative and to drive value kind of within their structures. I think they're just generally not set up to make the most of the employees that they have. So I think that could be a real win-win in general, if we can find a way for more of that to happen.
So you've talked about going into the office to sort of create that difference between sort of home life and work life, with this organisation that you've also sort of said is almost more circumstance than your lifelong ambition to run your own business. What does that mean in terms of your sort of day-to-day, how you work and how you organise yourself? You've firstly got that sort of natural cut-off between home and work, and you've got a bit of a commute in there, which if you're anything like me, you find as either a way to relax and read those books so you don't do any work, or jump on the work.
It's the former for me, really. So I think I'm very keen. So my wife and I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I have been very keen from the start to be very involved as a parent. And my wife also works, so we've always taken the view that parenting is a team sport, and it's we should try to do things as 50-50 as possible in terms of logistics. So so I've always taken my daughter to nursery or to school in the mornings, and my wife has generally done pickup in the evenings.
Yeah.
So I was lucky in that music industry company that they had a very enlightened view on the kind of workplace logistics. So at that company, no one was expected to be in the office before 10 o'clock. So that enabled me to quite straightforwardly, do the school run and get the train and be in the office by 10. I mean, we were expected in the office at 10, but that worked fine. And so I do the same thing now. So I don't tend to actually get into the office until about 10 o'clock. And then I'll tend to work through to about 6:30 and head home from that. But also I'm pretty careful to demarcate my time between work and home. So I will, check things on the phone in the evening, probably up until about 8:30, 9 o'clock. In terms of communicating with my co-founder and just responding to the odd email, but I don't tend to do much work in the evenings unless there's something that has to be done, and similarly at the weekends. And I think we'll see if we're able to make this company a success with me doing that. But I do think it's really important, and it's important for myself, as we get going as a company and when we start bringing in more of a team, that I know that people will use me as an example, either consciously or subconsciously. And I just think that family and kind of whatever you do outside of work is just as important as the work, if not more so. And so I think it's really important that, for me, it feels important that I give as much kind of time and focus on that side of things as I do to the work.
That's really refreshing to hear as somebody with a still fairly new business. And I think a lot of people, I mean, in my experience, I sort of started my business, worked ridiculous hours, and then had a sort of a number of life traumas that push me into a different direction, and obviously that's now what I talk about, but it took a good few years of doing the opposite before I sort of sussed it, and certainly to sort of be crafting it that way to begin with, and saying whether that'll continue to work, I don't know. I can't see why it wouldn't, as long as you're intentional about doing it. It's
I guess it's being in the kind of startup ecosystem, although I'm not that keen on the term startup, but I think that is what we are. Then I think there is a culture or an expectation in this kind of tech startup ecosystem of putting in ridiculous hours, doing all-nighters, absolutely smashing it. And I think that is fine it's probably fine-ish for certain groups of people, like maybe those who just recently graduated from uni and don't have other commitments. But I think for people, once you get to kind of starting a family, stage, I just don't think that's sustainable from a personal point of view. But yeah, I think in terms of the being intentional about it, it's something that I'm very careful about. I was just going to say that, I mean, there have been times, certainly while I was doing my MBA, while also having a full-time job a couple of years ago, I mean, that did involve a lot of late nights, reading, doing assignments, writing pieces, and quite a lot of time away, because I was doing that MBA at University of Cambridge, so I was having probably one weekend a month, one kind of long weekend a month up there doing that, and then there were a couple of week-long trips as part of the program. And so I've definitely gone through that period of quite a lot of time pressure, and quite a lot of late nights, and quite a decent chunks of time when when frankly my wife had to pick up the slack of child rearing. So yeah, it's not to say that it's always possible, but at least being intentional about it. So we knew when I went into that program, this was how it was going to be, and that it was going to be hard, but it was for a defined period of time, and it was for a very specific reason, to get this qualification. So yeah, I think it very much depends on your kind of circumstances.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So let's explore a bit more about the sort of getting stuff done. We've talked about the sort of dividing the home life and work life, and sort of crafting the times around that and those sorts of needs. What about day to day actually getting things done? How you do that, and what technology you're using? You're a startup in a co-working space. Do you use 25 million apps and tools because it's high tech?
We do use quite a few, to be honest. We use Slack for just communication between myself and my co-founder and some other people that we work with. Use a ton of email, as you'd expect. We really like HubSpot. I don't know if you've used that or come across it, but so we use that quite extensively to keep track of our contacts and conversations we're having with sales leads and with investors and that kind of thing. And that has a really good task system, so you can set tasks for yourself, and kind of attach the record of the person. So if it's like, I need to follow up with so and so about that email, you just create a task for a specific date and time, and the system will then come back and be like, okay, it's time to do this now. So I find that really useful because I have quite a poor memory for tasks, so I need to externalize them out of my head as soon as possible, otherwise I'll forget. So that's really good. But I have to say my standby technology, my core tech for getting stuff done is a notebook and pen.
That's why you get on with Paula.
right, exactly.
As well.
So yeah, I tend to do the classic, write a short list either at the end of the day for the following day or at the start of the day of maybe 3 or 4 things to do, and try and work through those and get them done. I don't really distinguish very much between kind of big things and small things. I possibly should, but yeah, and I certainly don't always get through the list. Probably rarely actually get through everything on that list.
It's an underrated thing to do, you know. All those, or should I say overrated thing? No, overrated, isn't it? All those people who get through their whole list, you know.
How are those people? How do they live? Like, what? I just, you know.
I don't know that they actually exist unless they've only got 3 things on there. To be fair.
I can't imagine how smug I would be if I always got through my list.
I sometimes just forward a load of things on because I use an online app. Forward a load of things on to the next day, clear the things I have done, and then it goes down to well done. You've got a clear.
That's good. What's that app?
Yes, that's why I don't use paper. You see, it's too obvious when you don't do things that you're supposed to.
Yeah, that's true. Well, accountability is good, right?
Exactly. Cool. So, any more apps that you're dying to share with us?
I use Receipt Bank and Xero.
So do I.
So that just makes keeping track of receipts, which is obviously the bane of any self-employed person or anyone running a company. It's the bane of their lives. So Receipt Bank works really well and it integrates well with Xero. So that just keeps that easy. And you can do it in the moment, so it isn't one of those jobs that kind of builds up and then you have to spend 4 hours sifting through piles of paper.
No, that's what I used to do, and now I've got really good at doing it in the bank. But then I get stuck with the app and think, I haven't sent any of the thing. You know, I go to reconcile my bank account or something. I haven't sent any of the receipts into the bank account. I've got to go and do it now.
That's true. Yes, it still does take time at some point in the process, but yeah.
Exactly, but as you say, it's way better that you're not actually typing all the individual bits of detail in, and that the Receipt Bank app just does that for you. It's revolutionary.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, what about sort of learning this sort of stuff and making sure that you're equipped to, run this business that you weren't, totally aware you wanted to run, or how do you make sure that you're, learning the things you need to do and that you are at that sort of, because you talked about you're in the sort of startup world. How do you make sure you're keeping, abreast of what's going on?
I'm a big reader. I love reading. If I didn't have anything else to do each day, I'd very happily just read all day, every day.
That's my dream job.
Yeah, exactly. How do we do that? We should start a company to do that. I tend to read. I don't like reading on screens. I find it quite tiring. I think there's something to do with the light and how your eyes interact with it physically that makes it quite tiring. So I'm a big believer in paper books and paper magazines. So magazine wise, The Economist is my go-to for news and stuff. I just love the way that they it's all analytical, so it's not just this thing happened, this thing happened, this thing happened. It's this thing happened and here's what it means and here's how it interrelates with this other thing that's also happening. And because it's only weekly, by being weekly, they can take that higher level analytical view of what's happening. So I love The Economist. And there's a magazine that's quite new. I don't know if you've come across it, called Courier. And I used to read Wired magazine quite religiously for for all the tech stuff. But I went off it a bit, and Courier has really kind of filled that gap. It's really well put together, and it's really about, I think its tagline is something about modern business, like understanding modern business. So they have kind of, features, interviews, news stuff around kind of some tech related things, but also like new approaches in retail, in kind of bars and restaurants and travel, and so that's a really good read. And then on the books side of things, I've been trying to move away from reading so much non-fiction recently. So trying to read a bit more fiction, just to get my head in a different place every now and then. And I've been focusing on trying to read fiction written by female authors, because I, in the past, have tended towards the kind of Jonathan Fransons and Dave Eggers, and the kind of somewhat literary kind of American male perspective. But yeah, so I've been consciously trying to read more fiction written by women. I read an amazing novel over the last couple of months called The Blazing World by Siri Hustvedt, which is just phenomenal. So yeah, I try to read fiction, some fiction, and then also on the non-fiction side, I've been reading quite a lot of stuff about systems thinking recently. So thinking about democracy as a system, economics as a system. So yeah, there's a few books around there which have been really, really good, and it's that kind of feeds more directly into what we're doing at Workio, is that we view company culture as a system, and it's you need to understand it as a kind of ecosystem problem that you can't necessarily solve with just doing 2 or 3 things and then everything will be fine. It's more like viewing it as perhaps as a garden, which is a metaphor that came from this book Gardens of Democracy by Eric Liu and Nick Hanauer, and they're talking about the American political system. And it's amazingly prescient. I think it was published in about 2012 or 2014, and it just perfectly describes all of the problems that have led to Donald Trump. But maybe it was even 2010, but so it was from a few years before. But their view of thinking of the democratic system as a garden that you have to weed, so you do have to tend it. And you also have to think of it as you need to create conditions for things to flourish, rather than kind of directly, acting on the thing itself. And that's really the approach that we take to company culture as well, and thinking of it as it's about the conditions that are created that enable positive things to happen, rather than trying to kind of bludgeon something into being positive by acting on it directly.
Yeah. So before we started, we talked about your thoughts around reflection versus action, and I was saying, we can talk about that when we come up to it in the interview. And it just strikes me that your choice of reading, and again your intentionality around you're saying that you're reading sort of more female authors than male authors for a particular reason. You do sound like a particularly reflective person, and obviously you've just talked about the political stuff as well. I suppose my challenging question is, how do you make sure you are getting things done when you're a very reflective person? I'm the opposite. I tend to just do stuff and I need to spend more time reflecting. But when you are, which I'm guessing you are, how do you, what's that balance for you? And how do you decide, when you're being intentional, how much you focus on one or the other?
Yeah, I do find it very difficult. So I think it's real help for me that my co-founder in this business, Alan Stewart, is very much the opposite. So he's more like you. He's very action oriented. So he pushes us certainly faster than I would be able to push us myself. And I think it's really about all of this stuff is about trying to find the right balance, either as an individual or if you're working in a group, to have that kind of balance across the group.
Yeah. So he takes the action and you rein him back, and then vice versa. You think about things and he you forward.
Yes, exactly. He kicks me up the arse to get something done. Yeah, I think that's right. But also, I think I do tend to think, this might be entirely self-serving, but I do tend to think that reflection is underrated. I think so. One of the things that Al said to me before is, that the emails I write are really well crafted. So even if that's just talking to a contact that we've been put in touch with, for a general chat, or for, with a sales lead, or with someone that we're engaged with, or whatever. He says that, like, the way that I write in my emails is very kind of precise and nuanced, and he's more like, just write the thing and, like, hit send and move on to the next.
Whatever.
Right. Which again is, like, really useful in a lot of scenarios, and it's about finding the balance. But I think in general, people tend to think that the optimum balance is probably a bit too on the action side, rather than the reflection side. And I think, kind of thinking in that systems way again, I think this is where companies like Facebook and Uber, kind of, that's where they've gone wrong, is, that famous Facebook mantra of move fast and break things. They've broken quite a lot of stuff by now, including the American democratic system. And so I think hopefully people will start to think, actually, maybe we should just think about the potential consequences of stuff, maybe, before we do it. That's not to say never do anything, because of course there's risk involved in anything that we do. But I think dialing that kind of bias to action back a bit might get us better results from the stuff that we do.
Well, it's that sort of balance, a bit like you're saying about, reading more female writers to balance up all the sort of male writing that you've read. It's if we as a business, society, individual can work on that balance ourselves, or, as you say, work with somebody who balances us, then that's all to the good, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, talking about that, then let's talk about other people working with you and sort of helping you. You obviously have a business partner, and you've mentioned there's other people that you work with within the business. Tell us a bit more about the importance of working with other people.
Well, I think the key thing for me particularly is I've been working on this on the kind of project that has become Workio for probably about three and a half years, largely as a kind of side project while I was doing my previous job, and then for the last 8-9 months full time. And during that period, there's been ups and downs. You kind of get encouraged by something, and then you get discouraged by something else. And I think for me, it's been really important to have a bunch of people, and that's not really people that I'm working directly with. It's actually more friends and family and other professional contacts who are just encouraging. And when they have heard about what I'm doing at Workio, they're like, oh yeah, I can really see how that would be useful, how it's necessary. Like, oh, you should talk to this person, that person. And so I think without that, I think I would have given up a long time ago. So I think that's partly down to my character, I guess. That I'm naturally, I'd say, Not exactly pessimistic. I'd say probably on the pessimistic side of realistic. So I'm naturally quite a cautious person.
Yeah.
So I think without having that kind of encouragement and like, yes, this seems like a real thing. You should really try it and go ahead with it. Yeah, I think without that, I wouldn't still be going on about it.
Yeah. So, well, again, that relates into that sort of balance thing of and working with other people to get that balance, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, I guess if I was a super optimistic, everything's always going to be awesome kind of character, then I might actually need other people to rein me in a bit, like we were just talking about with me and Al. Where I might need a more realistic friend to say, like, well, just hold your horses a little bit. So again, I think it comes back to that idea of balance and the idea of thinking of yourself in a system. I think enables you to think in that way and to kind of make the most of the other people and the other kind of things happening around you, rather than thinking that everything is about you as an individual and whether you succeed or fail, that is all down to you and it's all on your shoulders and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, what about those days then when things don't go right? So it hasn't been a great day, something horrible's gone wrong. How do you deal with that?
When things have gone not very well, I tend to stew on it, which is not ideal. And then probably once I've been mulling it over for a bit, then I'll tend to talk it through with my wife. So yeah, I think I tend to kind of internalize things for a period of time and then be able to address them. So usually I would say that the kind of ups and downs are usually on a larger scale than day by day for me. So it would usually be like kind of a few days of feeling a bit stalled, feeling a bit stuck. And quite often when I'm in the office with Alan, we'll both be in a similar headspace, which is, working in a place called Mindspace, that makes sense, where we'll kind of both be in a bit of a funk about, how things are going. And it usually it's Alan, because he's more vocal than I am. He'll just kind of bring it up and I'll be like, it's just not, it's not firing at the moment, it's not clicking, and then we'll talk things through, and then that usually gives us a lot more kind of positive energy to move forward, because it kind of clears our own heads as to what's stuck.
And it's that bringing somebody else in to it again as well.
That's really important.
And okay, what about those days where you've ended the day knowing that you've had the chance to live more, which is where I talk about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the things that you feel you should do or you have to do? What does that day look like for you?
In terms of the content of the day itself? I'd say it's having a morning where I don't have to get our daughter ready by myself is always useful. So sometimes my wife will have early meetings and stuff like that, or be away for work, and that is always just a bit more painful, getting out the door and getting to school. So usually we're both at home, so it's quite a relaxed morning. I try to go to the gym on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays and Saturdays, which sometimes I will manage for a few weeks in a row and then it kind of falls off. But usually it's pretty good. So it would probably be, I'll have been to the gym, I'll got home, my wife and daughter will wake up and we'll, get ready for school and things. And then, I'll be getting into the office and doing something, getting some positive feedback from outside. I think that's the key to a day feeling good for us is, having a good meeting with a sales prospect or giving some results from our process to a client and having them kind of surprised and kind of excited about what we find. So it's really about having what we do making a positive difference to someone else. That's really the key. And so it's usually it'll be that or making significant progress with something internally, but that never quite feels as good as the kind of external validation. And then getting home at not too bad a time, probably just before my daughter goes to bed, so I can see her and do the reading stories, saying night and all that stuff, and then having dinner and a conversation with my wife, and that's really that's a good day.
No, that's good to hear. Lovely. Well, thank you, Kieron. It's been really interesting talking to you, and I think a lot of resources that haven't been shared on previous shows as well. So thank you, and some good reading material as well. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Joe.
So how can people find out a bit more about you and connect with you?
They can, for Workio, our website is workio.co, that's .co, and we're on all the kind of social stuff. If you search for We Are Workio on Facebook and Twitter and all that, Instagram, although we don't really know how to use Instagram, I'm very confused, but we're on there. And for me personally, probably Twitter's the easiest, which is just at Kieron Faller. That's my main social outlet. I don't do Facebook or Instagram on a personal level.
No. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
All this information is available on the show notes if you go to the link powertolivemore.com / in this case 91, you'll find them there. As I missed a week of the newsletter a couple of weeks ago, I shared the tools from last week's newsletter with you on the last podcast. So this week, rather than sharing a tool with you, what I'd like to do is ask you for some help. I'm doing some research as to the needs, wants and frustrations of home-based coaches and consultants, and I've created a survey that will take you about 3 minutes to complete. And if you're a home-based coach or consultant, please do hop over to powertolivemore.com / survey, SURVEY, powertolivemore.com / survey, so that you can fill it in for me. And if you can't remember that link, then if you just go to my website, powertolivemore.com or joedodds.com, either will get you there. You'll be able to see it on the right sidebar of the homepage and also on the blog. And please do share it. There are tons of home-based coaches and consultants in the world, and I bet you know some of them, same as I do. And I'd really love to reach as many people as I can. It's interesting, I've had a few responses already, and a lot of the sort of the good things about working from home, you won't be surprised to hear, not needing to commute and being able to, do other stuff in your life, integrate your life within your working day because you're at home and able to do that. Obviously, some of the challenges are the flip side of that sometimes the work stuff doesn't get done because you're too busy doing home stuff, which gets in the way. And then there's some negative comments around, feeling isolated and not having that face-to-face contact or that ability to, or that option to collaborate with people, get people to sort of informally listen to you so you can bounce ideas off them and that sort of thing. So some of that stuff, is sort of what I would have expected, but there's plenty of opportunity to actually fill in stuff in your own words. It's not just tick boxes. So it'd be really good to get your thoughts on what the advantages are of working from home and what the frustrations are. So if you can, and if you fulfill that criteria, if you are based at home and you're a coach or a consultant, please do hop over there. It's powertolivemore.com/survey. And as I say, I'd really, really appreciate it if you could share it with other people so that I can get as many responses as possible. So thank you for that. And again, the show notes for this week's show are powertolivemore.com/91. And we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.